Hey guys, it's Danny. As I promised you in yesterday's video, today we're going to elaborate a little bit more on the subject of terminal spikes on Phalaenopsis orchids. And let me just start off by another new addition that I purchased yesterday actually, and I pre-recorded yesterday's video so you didn't see it. There she is. It's the very first time that I see this hybrid. I'm guessing it's a new hybrid, but I'm not entirely sure. In any case, it is really just this colorful in real life, and the nursery is this one. Maybe you have access to it, maybe it's in your country. It is a commercial nursery. I don't think it's open to the public, but if you have flower shops that you know bring orchids from this company, do visit them around this time of the year. Maybe you'll be in luck. Alrighty, so back to the subject. Today I'm gonna elaborate more on what a terminal spike is, why I think it is produced, and a few scenarios you might encounter with one such Phalaenopsis. So first off, when you purchase a Phalaenopsis orchid, typically you'll have between 1 to even 4 flower spikes, and if you trace them down to the base of the orchid, you will discover they are produced by the central stem beneath the leaves. Normally, flower spikes always come from the sides of the stem. This leaves the crown of the orchid free to create what it's supposed to create, meaning leaves. Normal Phalaenopsis orchids have a sort of funnel in the center in their crown, and this is where new leaves will start to grow when growing season starts, after the flowers fade typically. Flower-wise, a terminal spike Phalaenopsis looks absolutely normal. It can even be the same variety as others at the same time, but if you trace back the spikes, at least one of them will arise from the center, from the crown of the orchid. And I think you will better see it if I rotate the orchid. If we look at this orchid, we can see that some of the flower spikes arise from their normal place on the side, underneath the leaf, but one of them is sprouting directly from the crown of the orchid. There doesn't seem to be a definite answer why some Phalaenopsis create terminal flower spikes. There are just some guesses. My opinion is that in some instances we are dealing with a flower spike which cannot poke through the leaf tissue, this cuticle, so it starts to take the easiest way out. I did have a flower spike arising at some point from somewhere near the crown, so I can see how a spike can actually sprout from the center of the orchid, simply because it doesn't have enough strength. In this instance, we can explain why some of these orchids actually can continue to survive. But there are other people who think that this is actually a genetic trait, an anomaly, a mutation. And based on the recent things happening in my collection, I'm starting to agree to that as well. I just think there are multiple instances or cases on the market, which we will discuss about today. The problem with these types of orchids is that you never know what the orchid will do next. We're gonna go through some scenarios, but I think you can see that if you are new to orchids and you purchase one of these orchids in order to grow it, you might be a little thrown off by the behavior of the orchid. So of course, if you really like it, you can purchase it, but now you know that there is a real chance that in the end the orchid will completely not make it. I wouldn't gift it to anybody for this reason, but if you want to purchase it and take the risk, here is what you should know. So the first case scenario, and the best one, is that these orchids can actually start to put on new leaves from somewhere near the spike. The problem with terminal spikes is that they completely ruin the growth node here. A flower spike which cannot sprout from its normal location will pretty much pierce through this tissue. Imagine a flower stake just placed in the center of the crown. That is pretty much what a flower spike which grows like this will do. But if the flower spike just misses the growth point, the orchid can actually still put on normal leaves, maybe a little bit weird looking due to the fact that they need to avoid the flower spike, but the orchid still has a crown and can still grow on normally afterwards, like nothing ever happened, and in time pretty much look normal again. If you search the internet, you will find many cases on forums or personal blogs who suggest the orchids actually continue to grow after a terminal spike. My suspicion is that in this case we are dealing with one of those spikes which just took a shortcut and managed to miss the crown. Case in which making sure that the orchid is strong and is receiving good care, good watering and fertilizer can prevent us from ever having this type of problem again. Since I believe this is more of a cultural issue, not genetic, we are less likely to ever have a terminal spike again if we correct whatever caused it in the first place. And I think that it's pretty logical to deduct that if the flower spike was just too flimsy due to the orchid being stressed, it couldn't really pierce through the leaf. In my case, I think it is pretty pretty clear that the flower spike completely destroyed the crown. It is a pretty thick flower spike, and I don't see how the orchid can still produce leaves from around the flower spike. The preservation instincts, let's call it like that, of the plant will start to kick in, and it will try to propagate through keikis, meaning baby plants. There are two types of keikis which Phalaenopsis can produce. The first type of keiki is the flower spike keiki, case in which a baby plant sprouts from the actual flower spike of the orchid below the flowering side. So in my example, you can see that the flower spike has some nodes, even some branches, but at some point, buds start. On this section, beginning with just below the first bud and the tip of the flower spike, we cannot have keikis. Where we can have keikis is at the nodes on the flower spike. So we can even have one on the branch here before the flowers, even next to the branch, or even lower on the flower spike on one of these eyes. These are dormant buds, growth buds. This is not a good place for keikis to be produced generally, but sometimes in rare occasions you will see keikis being produced from the very tip of the flower spike. I've seen it happen only a few times though. No, it's possible, but next to the buds you will not have keikis. Now, the fact that the orchid has a terminal spike doesn't mean it will wither off very soon. It can take a few years even. So in the meantime, the orchid has plenty of time to mature its keikis. So if you're lucky to get a flower spike keiki, you can let it mature until it has a few roots and then detach it from the flower spike, pot it separately, and there you have it. You have a perfect clone of the actual orchid. I'll link you down below to a video in which I remove a flower spike keiki. You will see that in the case of that video, the orchid suffered from crown rot and also stem rot, I suppose. Again, it is the survival mechanism kicking in again. It is the very same thing, but I'm happy to say that that keiki is still alive today. So you can definitely wait for the orchid to produce a keiki. Do not cut the flower spikes. If you do want to cut them, just cut beneath the first bud, so this portion here, to allow the flower spike to create a keiki somewhere on one of the nodes. But as many flower spikes as you can leave on the plant. If the orchid has a good root system, everything will be okay. She will have enough energy to produce some keikis, and maybe the more keikis you'll have, the better. Third case scenario, let's say your orchid doesn't have flower spikes, or you already cut the flower spikes because you didn't know that you had a terminal spike. There is still hope because the orchid can put on what we call a basal keiki. This keiki sprouts directly from the stem of the orchid next to the mother plant. I'll give you some close-ups. A basal keiki can happen even if the orchid still has flower spikes, but in this case you can actually leave the keiki attached to the mother plant. It is not advisable to remove it when it doesn't have roots. When it does have roots of its own, you can remove it, but just be careful not to remove parts of its stem. You can absolutely leave the keiki on until the mother plant naturally just fades one leaf after the other, and at some point you will be able to easily remove the stem of the mother plant, which is already dried. In this way you are not actually risking the keiki. So these were 3 happy scenarios. Now let's talk about the most unhappy scenario, the one that I'm showing you right now. As you can see, I don't know if you noticed, I have 2 orchids here. This is a mother plant, and that's a basal keiki. At some point last year I noticed this orchid was not growing at all. It was trying to put on a leaf here which was slightly contorted, and after the leaf fell and practically the crown was destroyed, I noticed this used to be, or tried to be, a flower spike, a terminal flower spike. I purchased this orchid in perfect condition, not with a terminal flower spike, so this can happen to orchids you already have as well. But it's not very common, so don't be scared. It rarely ever happens. I was just unlucky with it. So the orchid put on a basal keiki, which put on a flower spike. I thought the orchid was saved, and lately, what do I see? Yet another terminal spike on the keiki. And the keiki itself has one little leaf here. This can decide to be just a leaf on a note, and then the flower spike will continue from the middle. It can also decide to be yet another keiki. I'm not sure what it will decide, but this is the saddest case scenario because this means this is a perpetual gene. There's nothing in its environment that produced this. it is just bad genetics, which happens when you cross orchids so many times. Some of them will have some issues. So in this case, even the keiki has a terminal spike, which means it will not produce any more leaves from this point. I'm hoping it will produce a keiki from the flower spike, but what if that keiki will produce yet another terminal spike, and so on and so forth, and the problems will never stop. I think I can continue to keep this orchid alive, but it will always be under some amount of stress, which will just weaken it, and at some point I'm not entirely sure if it will have the strength to create another keiki. So this can happen as well. The problem is you never know what's going to happen. I should include another case scenario, but it is really rare. I don't want to scare you guys, but it can actually happen. The scenario in which the orchid will not produce spike keikis or basal keikis, but just wither off slowly. I only encountered it once. One of my viewers actually sent me some pictures of their orchid. It was pretty much done. There was nothing more to do. The flower spikes did not want to create keikis. They just withered off. There was no basal keiki, so that was the end of the orchid. But as I was saying, it's a very rare case scenario. So if you have one of these orchids, just hold on to it and hope that it will be okay. But now you know what to expect. So in the end, purchasing one of these orchids is absolutely your choice. I would not get it to gift it to somebody who doesn't know about orchids. If you're on a budget though, well, maybe skip on the orchid and get another one. I hope this video was helpful though. Let me know down below in the comment section if you've ever had one of these orchids. What was the outcome? Did you manage to save it? Let's get some more statistics and see how often certain things happen. And with that said, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed it. And you know the drill. Like or dislike this video below. Subscribe to my channel for regular orchid videos, tutorials, Q&As, and other fun orchid subjects. And if you like YouTube to notify you whenever I upload a new video, just turn on notifications for my channel. Also, if you want to learn more about my setup and how I grow my orchids, just check the description. I list everything there. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!